Can you tell me about when and where exactly you were born?
I was born in Estherville, Iowa in September 28th, 1959.
Hmm. When did you move from Iowa to Crocker?
We moved to Missouri in 73.
Hmm.
So I was 13, 12, 13. Most of the towns we lived in were small towns
Hmm.
and even though Storm Lake was a bigger town, they were all basically agricultural based. There's a lot of farmers around, very typical Midwest. You know, when you drove around, if somebody'd wave at you and you'd wave back, having no clue who they were.
Mm, yeah. Hmm.
So moving down to Waynesville, Missouri was a big change
Hmm.
because, it was so amazing how the difference was. And everyone was more closed off and they were friendly, but not as friendly as I remembered.
So there was a lot of like different communities that you saw that like
Hmm.
throughout
Yeah.
your childhood then.
Yeah. By the time I graduated from high school, I'd been to 13 different schools.
Wow. I didn't know you'd gone to that many.
Grandpa would get promotions when he would look for jobs where he get
Hmm.
promoted. That was how he did it by
Yeah.
changing departments.
Oh, okay.
So, and then we lived in Waynesville for a year and maybe a half, and then moved to Crocker. And we stayed at Crocker until I graduated from high school.
Hmm.
So when you think about it, I started high school. I was all 4 years at Crocker. We lived in a variety of houses. We had one new house that was in Waynesville.
Hmm.
We only lived there for about 6 months. We had lived on farms a lot because Grandpa felt more comfortable and it's cheaper.
Hmm.
Um, we never farmed, but we always had gardens. The the houses were older, typical farmhouse. We moved into one in Stockton. We had the build. It was so big, so many rooms.
Hmm.
Grandpa and Grandma pulled out their lawn chairs to put in one room. They didn't have enough furniture,
Oh, wow.
so usually your mom and Marcia and I shared a room
Hmm.
because so it was always like 3 bedrooms, no more.
Hmm.
And in Waynesville, Marcia got a room by herself, and your mom and I shared. And James lived in the basement. We kind of walled it off with stuff.
Hmm.
It was unfinished basement. I love old houses, and so I always loved the houses we had. A lot of character in those houses.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of disadvantages because they were older, you know, little bitty closets, little bitty bathrooms.
Hmm.
Mom and dad were very family oriented.
Hmm.
Yeah. Depending on where we lived, when we lived in Davenport area, he was working 2 jobs to help pay for food and stuff.
What were the homes you were living in like?
Mom and dad always had a big garden because they couldn't afford to buy a lot of food. So mom canned a lot. Marcia was 5 years older, and that 5 years was really big because she viewed us, the little kids, down on my
Hmm.
nerve. And also, I didn't know at the time, but she knew that she was adopted at the time. The dad
Hmm.
wasn't her. I didn't know that. Your mom and Uncle James and I were thick as thieves. We did everything together. Okay. When your mom was little, it was like, I come to kind of, how the little baby
Hmm.
follows everything.
Yeah.
But James and I were only 18 months apart, so we did a lot of things together.
Hmm.
Then your mom, when she got older, we started doing stuff together, and we'd ride bikes together. We'd play together. When we camped, we would go out and play things. We camped a lot because
Hmm.
grandma liked to camp. So she would, dad said he would come home from the high grade, which was one of the plants he worked at.
Hmm.
And the bus would be all packed, and all he had to do was change out of his clothes, get in, and we'd drive away for a weekend. She wanted to camp. And when you think about it, that's really weird because she was so allergic to everything. That was probably the worst thing to do.
Really?
So, yeah, we were nerds. We were farmer kids.
Hmm.
Uh, Didn't have a lot of stuff. And when we did have stuff, it was make do. So a lot of times for um, my baby doll, I had a crib, but we had more than one doll, so we needed another crib.
Mm-hmm.
And mom got out a carrier that she had when I was little. And in those days, the baby carrier, there was a little black bed that just stayed
Mm-hmm.
on the back. So she gave that to us. So a lot of times we get leftovers. Well, this isn't working. You can have it. We came up with what we needed. When we lived on farms, we were outside a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't watch TV a lot because there were only 3 channels. If I wanted to go anything exciting, I had to find a book to go there
Mm-hmm.
because there was nothing to watch. As soon as Grandpa got home, it's like, get out of the way. I'm watching news.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
So I would dive into my book to get away. When we lived in, I was at Storm Lake. Mom called us down for supper, and I come down and tears are streaming down my face. And she goes, "What in the world? Beth died." I was reading Old Little Women, and Beth had
Mm-hmm.
just died. I was bawling.
Yeah.
She rolled her eyes, and I'm like, okay. We always had supper together. So we always sat at the table,
Mm-hmm.
and we would take rotations. I don't really remember with Marcia because I was so young when she was still there. She left when I was in junior high or middle
Mm-hmm.
school, they call it now, and didn't have much to do with this. So but we would take turns. Mom set up a rotation. Somebody cleaned off and set the table, and then cleaned it off after we got done. Someone washed the dishes, and your dad hated it when I said this, but someone wiped the dishes. You wipe your butt, you dry dishes. So we took turns.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't change. Went to have supper with a friend of mine. And I got home. It was my turn to wash dishes. They were there for me to wash. Didn't make any difference. You weren't there. You got to do it. That's your
Mm-hmm.
turn.
Mm-hmm.
She had the system. She had goals. We're not changing.
Yeah. What kind of role did religion play into your
Big,
lives?
really big. We always went to a church. We
Mm-hmm.
always participated. We always. I know when we got to Crocker, Dad joined as a elder. Excuse me, elder.
Mm-hmm.
He would have done that at other churches too, but we didn't stay there long enough for them to get to know each other. But we always went to Sunday school. Some of the churches, like in Storm Lake, we would go to Sunday school while they had church. And when I was 6th grade, that was perfect. So I didn't have to sit through the sermon, you know. We were always went to Christmas Eve service. Um, we very rarely didn't go to church on Sundays. That was just a given.
Yeah.
It's Sunday, so we go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we had, I don't know if we had any church, if we had any groups. I don't remember that,
Mm-hmm.
like kids groups. But then again, we were living on the farm and we only had one vehicle.
Yeah.
A little harder to get the kids into the church.
Mm-hmm.
So, but your great grandfather, grandma's father, was a deacon in the Presbyterian church, and sometimes he would do the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, your grandpa Helgeson, great grandpa Helgeson, they after they had supper or lunch or whatever, I can't remember, after a meal, then they bring out the Bible and do a Bible study. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was really strong.
Um, is there anything else you can tell me about your grandparents?
Um, Grandpa and Grandma Helgeson, I knew really well
Mm-hmm.
because every Sunday when I was little, we'd have to go over to their house, their farm. They lived on the farm that was Grandma Mabel's father's farm. It's a 100-year-old farm. In
Mm-hmm.
1976, it was considered a century farm. So 1876. Um, Grandma was a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
which was unusual in the 20s, where her mom and dad said, yeah, go get a degree. Um, she went to Des Moines, Iowa. And she said during that time, she did not see her mother. Every once in a while, her father would come up, my great great grandpa would come up and see her. My great grandpa, sorry, would
Hmm.
come see her. And he would ride the train up
Hmm.
because he didn't ride the cars. Um, there were 5 boys. And until, well, at grandma's 90th birthday party, somebody said, "What are the boys doing?" They were talking about my father and his
Hmm.
brothers. And they were all, the youngest one was 45, 50.
Hmm.
So they were the boys, the Helgeson boys.
Hmm.
Um, they raised, grandpa was a farmer. He had corn, he had soybeans. He always had some kind of animal. For when dad was little, they had a dairy farm.
Hmm.
And when I was little, they had sheep. And so you'd go see grandpa and grandma. And if you saw a bottle of 7-Up, or empty bottle of 7-Up on the counter, run
Hmm.
downstairs because that's where the lamb is. One of the sheep in septic. He didn't mow his lawn because he had sheep. He put the sheep out there and let them do it for him. Grandpa McCain, I was in third grade when he passed, um, was scared me because he was so tall and I was so little. And he was
Hmm.
quiet, very, very quiet, didn't talk a lot. Um, but he liked to have us come over. He played checkers with us. And like Grandma Mary, if you didn't win, you didn't win. That's just, you got to
Hmm.
learn how to do it. I do remember one time mom and dad went over there and he said, "Well, I got to go get something. Let's have some ice cream for." And she looked at him. She goes, "Dad, do not buy them any candy." He got in the car and said, "I'll do what I want to do." And go to the store. But we didn't see him as much as we saw the Helgesons because we didn't go every Sunday.
Hmm.
Grandpa McCain came from a big family. He had a big family, and they weren't wealthy.
Hmm.
They were all farmers. My Aunt Gertrude talked about how they had to move several times because they rented a farm, and it wasn't successful enough that they could continue renting it, so they had to move.
Hmm.
In fact, one time she and 2 of her sisters were living at one farm with some family, so they could stay in school while everybody else moved to another farm. So they weren't wealthy, and he was a good man, but I don't think he was a very good farmer.
Yeah.
It could be just the wrong time, wrong plants. You never know.
Hmm.
Grandpa Lorenzo, well, Grandma Helgeson, Grandma Mabel was the only child, spoiled rotten. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't poor. Grandpa Lorenzo had one brother and 3 sisters, and his father was loaded in those days. He was a um, senator or state representative. I'm not sure which.
Hmm.
And so, but they lived on the farm during the summer and the fall. Then when it got really cold, they'd move in town. They had a house in town too. When Grandpa's father died, he gave each of his boys, a farm, and each of the girls got a house, and gave all his grandkids that were alive a diamond. So he was pretty well off.
Yeah.
Um, the diamond that dad got, he put that in mom's wedding ring when they got married, but she lost it. The diamond fell out when she was
Oh
going to.
no.
So I will say I'm not sure they were the best parents
Hmm.
because sometimes I think Grandma Mabel was more intense when mom would get so angry because Grandma would tell, "Oh, this is how I did it when I was a mother." She did not. She did not. She had a woman doing the cooking and the cleaning so she could go off be a nurse. And, things that in those days that was not acceptable.
Hmm.
But they always had a little girl on hand to help with the house and the cooking. Grandpa was very strict. One of my uncles said sometime if you did something wrong, you got to whip it. Not a real beating, but he got spanked
Hmm.
pretty good. I do know that Grandpa and Grandma McCain were very into their kids. They were great. Talking to some of my cousins since I didn't get to know them, when they were younger. Loved having them. They said they were great grandparents. Great. You know what I mean? They were
Hmm.
great, or as a grandparent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you ever have any other questions, just holler. I'm the historian. I love the
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
Not like you.
I definitely picked you for a reason.
Yeah. And a lot of times I was like, well, would you just shut up, Lori? But that's just me
Mhm.
because I love it.
What were the family dynamics like?